Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. It is once again me, Zach, here today with another tier list for you guys. Today we're going to be doing some DRG stuff because it's been a pretty decent length of time since we had consistent DRG content on the channel. It's one of those games that just kind of comes and goes, but it had me thinking. I'm having a lot of fun doing the Pokemon tier list where I compare and contrast their designs and stuff and talk about it. So why not do that for another game that I love, which does not have, and this is confirmed, 1 bajillion different enemies in it. It has a much more reasonable number. So today, that's what we're going to be doing. It's going to be a little bit more in-depth than the Pokemon one, partly because there are fewer enemies, so it's a little bit easier to handle, but also for the simple fact that I want to talk a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit about the gameplay implications of each enemy as well. Talking about kind of the position they fill in the game and whether or not they do that effectively, or if I think that maybe they need some tweaks. So, to start with, we are going to be going in order of the enemy list on the wiki, just because that's a little bit easier for me. I tried to organize it a tiny bit down here, but it was such a mess, I'm just not going to mess with it. Let's get our first two dude bros up here to talk about. This is the glyphid spawn and the glyphid swarmer, respectively. The main difference between them mechanically, despite being functionally identical, is that the glyphid spawn has 7 fewer HP, 5 instead of 12 compared to the swarmer. I'm not going to give you guys the stats of every single enemy or anything like that for this. I don't really think that's necessary. But I did want to point that out because there is a distinct difference there. It doesn't matter a whole lot for most things because unless you're playing has 5 plus, whether that be has 5.5 or has 5 with modifiers, whatever, I'm fairly certain that all standard vanilla difficulties, if you take the Thorns perk, it will one-tap a swarmer when they hit you, regardless. So it doesn't make a huge difference overall. Now in terms of design, they're both basically just a normal glyphid, but small. That's small spelled with an O specifically. However, these little idiots hate me specifically, so they're going to be rated lower than the glyphid, I think. Slightly kidding. Only slightly, though. Overall, the role that they fill is mostly just to be an irritation. They are mostly problematic for specific loadouts, but on higher difficulties they are, I wouldn't say damage sponge, that's the wrong term, they are bullet wasters, if that makes sense. They basically just burn through your ammo. The most effective class for dealing with them is the driller. Depending on difficulty, engineer can do it because of the turrets, but again, that's a lot of ammo that you're wasting functionally just to kill little idiot babies. Overall, they fill their role perfectly fine. They irritate the piss out of me, and there's really not a ton of difference between them. Overall, I will say that if you're using the biome bugs mod, some of these bugs might be a little bit higher than they are in vanilla for me, because I really like the biome bugs mod. I like the variety that it lends to the game, and I enjoy some of the different colors of bugs a bit more than the default. But that being said, we're only talking vanilla here, so for these two, I do think that I'm going to put them both into B tier. I like the base glyphid design, as we'll see later. It's simple, but it's effective. It's bug-like without being too much like a typical insect. The fact that they have jaws that are like this, up and down, animal jaws rather than pincers, is it really lends a lot to their design being something a little bit off, a little bit wrong in a way. And I'm a big fan of that. Next up, we've got the glyphid exploder. I don't think any of the variations are on here except the rockpox infected one. But I will note here that in the radioactive zone specifically, enemies have slightly different stats. It should be noted that, because I didn't even think about this, glyphid swarmers are immune to radiation, like lingering radiation, if they are from the radioactive exclusion zone, because otherwise any tick of radiation damage would be enough to instantly kill them. In the same vein, the exploders come mostly in two varieties outside of the rockpox version, which is its own unique enemy. And that is, one explodes and do damage, one explode and do radiation. Sorry for that brief pause there. I thought I heard something in the distance. I thought the glyphids had finally come for me, but they did not, so unfortunately here I remain. Anyway, the glyphid exploder, the design is interesting. It looks almost diseased, even when it is not covered in rockpox, and I'm a big fan of that. The fact that it's red, I mean, that's one of those things, right? It serves a gameplay purpose. A wobbly red thing running at you rapidly immediately tells your gamer brain that it's going to explode, right? But I do think that some other variations of it would be cool, personally. That being said, it's still pretty decent. I like it. I like its fat butt. I like how it still has the little tiny face, which is its weak point, by the way. And as far as the role that it plays in the Glyphid army, it's a disruption tool. You have to respect it, especially on higher difficulties. You can't just let it explode. It's just really not an option. It is one of those things where its primary job is just to piss off the team and break up holds, as well as, of course, in most locations, fuck up the terrain. The more the terrain gets covered in exploder holes, the more you're going to be wanting an engineer around to smooth them out with platforms. It can be really annoying otherwise. They can be dealt with via melee by pickaxing them once in the face, and they can also be baited into exploding pretty easily by just standing near them for a second and then running away. Obviously, these sorts of things become much more risky the higher difficulty you play on, but still, they're not super difficult to deal with when it's a controlled situation. It's just that once there's 8,000 of the fucking things climbing down the walls at you, suddenly you remember that the face of God is nearer than any of us want to admit. So, for all that taken into account, I do actually think that this design is probably A tier. Their role is pretty simple, not gonna lie, but they fulfill it well. They pull off the design well. It's all pretty solid. I don't have any real complaints about exploders outside of it would be nice to see more variations. The main one that I'll mention is fungus bogs has slowing goo in it anyway. It would be cool to see an exploder that kind of creates, even if it's temporary, a puddle of that. Just more elemental variations of different bugs would be cool in general. Next up, we've got the Glyphid Web Spitter. The Glyphid Web Spitter is our first kind of full-sized Glyphid overall. The purple design makes it stand out well enough in most areas, although in Azure Wield and... what was the other one? Dense Biozone. To an extent, they don't really blend in, but it can be hard to pinpoint exactly where they're at in the tall ceilings, and in Azure Wield they do actually blend in pretty well. They are, of course, pretty typical across the board, outside of the fact that they do have ranged attacks. They are one of two that do have ranged attacks out of the normal Glyphids, and they're a pain in the ass, is the thing. They don't do a ton of damage, frankly speaking, but they slow you down and they obscure your vision when they hit you, which, again, much like a lot of these guys that we've already talked about, their primary role is disruption and annoyance. They are there to impair your ability to fight back, and this is, to an extent, a movement shooter, more than almost anything. It's a TF2-esque game. And for that reason, it's important to be able to move all the time. But the glyphid web spitters say, nah, what if you were slow, though, and also couldn't see where you were jumping? And the answer is that would suck, and I hate it. And that's the glyphid web spitter. It fulfills its design marvelously. Overall, the kind of spiky look to it is fine. I'm gonna be honest though, I don't actually think its design fits its purpose all that much. It's so spiky that unless you know what it does, you would almost, if I were just showing you the designs in a vacuum, you would probably be forgiven for thinking this is a melee fighter, who's maybe, on the lightly armored side, but pretty heavily leans towards, like, dealing damage, let's say. Kind of a light, squishy DPS bug. But that is the opposite of what it is, actually. I mean, it is a squishy DPS bug, but it is a ranged version of that. I don't know exactly what they could do to differentiate the spitters too much. They do spit, so adding like a nozzle to their back or something would not necessarily make a lot of sense, but overall I think the design is fine. It goes in the C for average tier, though. It does not move from this location. Next up on our list, we get to the OG, the actual glyphid grunt. I've already talked about this in the videos so far. This is an A-tier design. It's one of my favorites. It's very simple. It's very basic. And the coloration in vanilla is pretty, not boring, but the fact that it's standardized across the different biomes and stuff is a bit of a bummer. That being said, it's still quite good, and of course it fills its role magnificently. The role is in the name. It is the grunt. It is the horde of disposable bodies to eat your bullets and slow you down. The higher the difficulty gets, the more you do have to, an extent, respect the damage it deals. But that goes for everything. I mean, on higher difficulties, the baby swarms become terrifying, let alone a glyphid grunt swarm. That being said, no real complaints with it. It's just not quite S tier because it is I wouldn't say boring, but it is the basic mook enemy, right? It is the grunt, the minion, the goon, as it were. Next up, Glyphid Acid Spitter. The design of this is actually pretty similar to the Web Spitter. However, the bright red coloration immediately tells you that this is something not to be fucked with. I do think that this design, spoiler alert here, goes towards the top of B tier. The Acid Spitter is, in my opinion, one of the run-ender bugs. This is one of the bugs that will absolutely tear apart your team and ruin your chances of survival because just the way that it works, what it can do to you from range is kind of rough to deal with. It deals a lot of damage, is the main thing, but it's also, again, ranged. It's also one of those bugs that doesn't stand out quite well enough in the dark. This is one of those things that makes you really, really want a scout on your team, because it will stealth attack you with an acid blast from 8,000 miles away before you even know it exists, and it will hit you with almost perfect accuracy. The best way to deal with it is to keep moving at all times, trying to shoot it while on the run, which of course requires you to have a decent grasp of like the area you're in and kind of know where you need to go to escape, which is all basic gameplay stuff, but it is one of those bugs. It does, as you get higher in difficulties and it starts hitting harder and harder, it does kind of force you to really use everything you've learned in a way that other bugs don't necessarily do. You know, a grunt is always a grunt. One grunt is pretty much never a threat. It only becomes a threat in huge numbers, and the same goes for most of these other enemies too. But one Glyphid Acid Spitter is scary. Even if they don't, even if you know they're there, they can occasionally be kind of rough to deal with. The head is the weak point for all of the Glyphids, basically, like all the standard variations of Glyphid, so keep that in mind. You can one-tap them under certain circumstances when they go to shoot you, but that involves you being able to see them and react accordingly, so heads on a swivel, everybody. Next up is the Glyphid Grunt Slasher. I didn't have a lot to say about the Acid Spitter's like art design because it's very similar to the Web Spitter. There's a lot more to talk about here. Much like what I was saying with the Web Spitter, though, this is a spiky boy. However, the slasher part of the design is absolutely perfectly encapsulated by transforming the normal kind of like worker bug legs of the grunt into actual blades. Um, while you were having sex, this bug was studying the blade. This is an S tier design, though. It's got, I mean, like, it's got exaggerated teeth. It looks more dangerous. It's got like these little chin spikes down there. You've got spikes down the back and everything. It really does capture the feeling of being a squishy, hard-hitting bug. Now, of course, it's not actually that squishy. It is tankier than the normal grunt in terms of HP and such. Though I think their armor is the same. But it's still quite easy to kill for pretty much any of the dwarves, with the caveat being, of course, that it does hit like a dump truck filled with smaller dump trucks. Not much else to say about it. It is pretty much perfect. As a variation of the basic grunt, there's little to say about it. You sprinkle it into the swarms, and it makes those swarms a lot more potent. That's what it's there for. That's what it do. Next up, I have to scroll down a little bit here. Am I blind? I am blind. I didn't need to scroll. It's right here. Glyphid Septic Spreader. This is a triple S design, actually. This thing fucking sucks. It's so annoying. The main purpose of this is a little bit different. While its obvious goal is disruption, as it fires projectiles that leave a lingering damage effect on the ground for a little bit, and it's not particularly weak from the front. As you can see, it's got this armored plate here. It's the actual way in which it disrupts is very different. It is an artillery piece more than it is like these ones. They're more like snipers or whatever. This lobs. It can fire over terrain. It can fire over walls. It can fire into, like, from a lower point on the map. It can fire up into the zone that you're fighting in with almost perfect accuracy, making it absolutely crucial to deal with. This is a bug that when you see one pop up, you instantly react to it. You have to kill it quickly. Sometimes, you're being swarmed by slashers or something, and you really need to deal with them more, but in most cases, you really want to beeline for the septic spreader. So, in terms of gameplay, now that they've kind of tuned it a little bit, I do think it is an S tier bug. Maybe it could use some tweaks here and there, being a little bit squishier, perhaps, or something like that, but either way, it very, very adequately fulfills its position in the game, and its design I really like. It's got its abdomen is kind of like pointed up into the air. There are certain types of fungus or like a parasitic. No, that's a parasite, not a fungus that time, right? The fungus does other stuff. Either way, there's parasites and fungus and such that make ants do this to get them eaten by birds. And it is a perfect mix of gameplay as well as, real life, because there's also types of ants that stick their abdomens into the air as a warning that, hey, I sting or I spray acid and you really don't want to fuck with me. So, it's both a good way to indicate, hey, the bright red-assed bug is very scary, while also, being something that's pretty realistic. And the fact that the bug has armor across all of its front but not its back, I think makes sense from kind of an evolutionary perspective. If we're talking about a form of evolution that is in an arms race with angry dwarves, which in this case, weirdly enough, we are, in fact, talking about that. Next up is the Glyphid Guard, the Grunt Guard specifically. I haven't really talked about the resistances of everything else, but we will mention here, these guys are 25% fire resistant, 20% corrosive resistant, and then 30% resistant to both frost and explosive damage. In addition to that, they have a way more armor, just in general, especially on their front legs, which have, I believe, 4 times the armor of the normal Glyphid Grunt, like, body. and they use these legs to kind of block enemy fire whenever they can. Their head is still a weak point, but of course their front legs, the heavily armored part, are there to cover that. In addition, they just have pretty decent HP compared to all the others, equivalent to the septic spreader at 270, which makes them overall very tanky. Now, in terms of their role, they are to be like kind of mini tanks. Again, they soak damage. If you don't have weapons that are good at dealing with them, it can be very annoying to handle them in general. They're not super threatening on their own, but as part of a group, they can definitely get the job done. For that reason, I do think that I would put them up here, right there. The glyphid grunt, in terms of design, is also great. It's the basic grunt, but heavily armored. The cool thing to me is that, you know, they gave them that little blocking animation with their front limbs, which I think is cool because there are types of insects that do similar things. Notably, there is, there's a type of ant? I think there's a type of termite as well that have oversized heads that they will use to block tunnels when facing invasions, kind of creating a facial shield wall of sorts, which is pretty cool. And this sort of design is sort of reminiscent of that a little bit. It's not their head they're using as a shield, but it is their front limbs, which I think works perfectly. Next up, though, we do have possibly a controversial one to talk about. Let me find it here. Where the heck is it? Am I stupid? Am I blind? Did they hate it so much they didn't put it on the list? Let me... I found it. It was right here. I'm stupid. So this guy, this is an F tier bug. Alright. This... Let me move the tier list where it's supposed to be. This is the glyphid stalker, which is 50% resistant to melee and 25% resistant to electricity for God only knows what reason. It's not particularly well armored, but it has more HP than the glyphid grunt does. So, you know, there's that. This thing is annoying. That's the main thing. You would think that an enemy that can turn invisible would have its main purpose be picking off dwarves that are alone, or maybe attacking only when the dwarf is engaged with other bugs to maximize the difficulty of that encounter. But instead they just made it so it short-circuits your shield for like 8 years and does a ton of damage. It's deeply obnoxious to deal with. Even if you see it and you reveal it, sometimes if it's just sprinting at you, it will just hit you anyway. And in a lot of instances, there's not a significant amount of warning before it hits you, or somebody else. So even if you do reveal it, it often gets in the hit that it would have had if it had stealth attacked you. I feel like if, as soon as it was revealed, it immediately burrowed, like no matter what, even if it was mid-attack, it just immediately started burrowing, that would help quite a bit. Or if maybe it didn't disable shields for as long, or just dealt a little bit less damage in general. As is, the actual design of it is okay. The green is a little bit odd to me because, like, the invisibility shimmer is more of a bluish and all that, and its purpose seems most similar to the glyphid Menace, which is also blue. So blue feels like it would have been the more obvious choice to pick. Plus, I feel like people just associate blue with invisibility anyway. It's not like this thing is using camouflage. It is explicitly turning invisible. Right? At least in terms of the gameplay elements of it. But the design itself, the physical shape of it, is not terrible. It would probably be much higher if it weren't for the fact that I just don't think it fulfills its duty very successfully. Next up, Glyphid Stingtail. We'll try and move a little bit faster here as we move forward. Glyphid Stingtail, this one, it is a C tier. It is high C tier, but it is a C tier. The main purpose of this was to help break bunkers and holds by pulling dwarves out of them outright. In that sense, I do think it's a really good bug to have in the game. My problem with it is it deals a ton of damage, and it's honestly really tanky for what it is. It's got even more HP than the Stalker did. The Stalker's at 360, this is at 400, putting it almost double the guard. And it has almost as much resistance as the guard. In fact, it's more resistant in terms of explosive damage, which it's 50% resistant to, and fire, which it's 30% instead of 25% resistant to. If it were squishier, I think it would be in a much better spot, where it would be easy to kill, but also wildly disruptive and crazy. As it is right now, it pretty much always gets a free hit on you when it pulls you in. It deals quite a bit of damage, and it's hard to kill, which is just a bad combo. It feels bad to fight. Not a huge fan of that one, to be honest with you. However, the overall design being reminiscent of something like a scorpion is pretty cool. I like the tusks / spikes on the front. I don't mind that too much. I just think that it's a little bit too much of everything all at once all the time. Do you know what I mean? So, Next up, we have this little guy. This is the Glyphid Sentinel. This only spawns when you're fighting the, what's it called, Broodmother? One of the big Glyphid dreadnoughts. It's kind of basic. I mean, it's sort of like a reskinned Praetorian, just fleshier in some places. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. I do think that it's probably overall kind of a C tier, but it's high in C tier. It does what it's meant to do. It's supposed to, slow down the Broodmother fight to an absolute crawl, which isn't really its fault. That's what it was designed for, so we can't really blame it too much. But I don't have a lot to say about it that I won't be saying about the Praetorian, so moving along. Next up is the Glyphid Menace. The Glyphid Menace, first off, very striking coloration, once again. We immediately have indicated to us that this is a dangerous enemy. It is a different color from pretty much all the other bugs, and it sticks out in most biomes. It does occasionally blend into certain parts of glacial strata, but even there it still sticks out consistently, I would say. The only time it's irritating at all is when you're in a location where it can sit crazy high up. It has a lot of weak points with the sacks on the sides, making it easy to kill if you're aware of it, and it makes a loud noise whenever it does just about anything. And it has pretty dog shit armor. So overall, it's squishy, but it deals a ton of damage, and it has a decent amount of HP, so it doesn't die too fast. That being said, the overall design of it is really cool. It almost looks like a bombardier beetle turned backwards, but it's facing forward. So for that reason, and the fact that it fills its role so adequately, I do think it goes at the top of A tier. It actually is one of my favorite bug designs in the game. It truly looks like it was modified to be a weapon with a very specific purpose, and that's it. In a similar-ish vein, we have the Praetorian. The Praetorian is extremely well armored, and I believe the tankiest thing we've seen so far with 750 base HP. It also resists pierce damage really effectively, for what that's worth. It doesn't have actual weak points. Hitting it in the back end, which we can't see in this little picture, but hitting it in the ass will just cause you to deal normal damage, as opposed to, the armor, which does jack diddly dog shit damage. So, pretty cool there. The Praetorian design is what if Glyphid but big and tanky, and I'm a big fan of that. I think I like the Praetorian design better than these other ones, to be honest with you. The main purpose of it is to be a big target that is also tanky enough to be a big target, and that has a relatively mid-range ranged attack, but one that causes it to be locked down in place. So for all those reasons, I do think it has a role that it fills very, very well. You don't see a ton of Praetorians in most like swarms, but that is because they are difficult to deal with and very effective at disrupting whatever plans you may have had. So, big fan of the Praetorian. There's also elemental Praetorians, but not nearly enough. I believe there is a frost one, right? That's not a modded thing, right? Yes. Yes, there's a glacial strata one. I had to double check because I didn't want to say that that was a thing, and then it turns out that was part of a mod. No, there's a glacial strata one, which of course, instead of breathing acid, you know, freezes you. Does that surprise you? There's, in addition, one for the radioactive exclusion zone, which is worth noting here because instead of spewing radiation out its mouth like Gojira, instead creates a, I guess like a ring, like a sphere, around itself of radioactive damage. They are also a little bit faster, which is really annoying. But it makes sense. They have to be faster to get closer because their attack range is heavily nerfed by being in a perfect AoE around them. It does mean, though, that radioactive exclusion Praetorians, you can't really melee in the ass or use like short-range weapons super effectively against them, because if you get too close, no matter where you are, they can hit you. So, overall, Praetorian, pretty fucking dope, bruh. Next up is the Warden, the Glyphid Warden, which is pretty decent. I like its design. It has like this big fleshy bulb at the top. I don't know exactly what that's supposed to be. I think it's their brain, though. They've got like these folded pink parts down here. That's going to get me demonetized. But I think that the whole vibe is supposed to be kind of a constricted brain with it like exposed out of the exoskeleton. Once again, we see this is a dangerous bug, so it's got its ass raised, and it is striking colors that are very unique and stand out in most biomes. Once again, in salt flats, sometimes the white kind of blends in a little bit, but it's still, the pink doesn't really match any other biome, so it's always pretty obvious. Plus, it creates like these glowy, like tendrils to any nearby bugs, so it's very obvious, very easy to see this. It's a high-level threat as well, because, of course, the main thing that it does is buff ally bugs nearby. That is its role in the game, and it performs it pretty well. It's incapable of fighting on its own, which is pretty interesting, I think. And it has a decent amount of HP. I believe it's like 800. Yeah, about 800 HP. Of course, stuff like that varies based off of difficulty, so if I say about 800, just keep in mind that is the HP. It might have more effective HP at higher levels when you deal less damage and they take less damage. It's full of weaknesses. Only the very well-armored parts on its legs and top of its head there are very resistant. The bulb is a ×3 weak point, and the face is a normal ×2, so pretty easy to kill with just about any class or weapon, but with the obvious caveat, of course, being that it will be surrounded by buffed up bugs. Next up, we got the Glyphid Oppressor. This is the Praetorian, but on super crack. It's almost invulnerable from the front in general. Only certain weapons can damage it from the front. Things like, basically, driller weapons that deal their damage in a weird way. Those can still be effective, but it ranges from like 25% to 66% resistant to basically everything in the entire game, making it insanely durable and very difficult to deal with depending on your team comp, right? Or your weapon builds, I suppose. It still has a weak point in its asshole region, which does make it killable, at least. I think its design is very striking. Despite being a sort of muted color scheme, it's so big, because it is bigger than a Praetorian. It's so big, and it has such a vertical presence with this, like, dome, not dome, but like Triceratops frill that it's got going on, that I do think it fills its role well while still letting the players know, hey, I'm dangerous, you should probably deal with me. This is a B tier design. I don't love it, but I like it, so it goes into B tier. Now on to the next one. The next one being one of our, actually, our first stationary. This is the Glyphid Brood Nexus, sporting a whopping 1800 HP. This thing is tanky as piss balls, brothers. It is, like I mentioned, stationary, and it is the source of the Glyphid swarm, or little tiny idiot babies, as I call them, that we were talking about earlier. It takes double damage when shot in the eyes, and each eye has 300 HP, meaning that you can pretty easily kill it by smacking its eyeballs around, which, I mean, that would work for me too. That would also kill me, so fair's fair. Overall, this is a banger of a design, frankly speaking. It's a weird fleshy mass with multiple eyeballs staring at you from the dark that spawns a swarm of babies to beat you to death. 10 out of 10. This is, in my opinion, not quite S tier, because it is stationary, but it is high A tier. It's one of my favorite creatures, despite the fact that it spawns the things that desperately want to kill exclusively me for whatever reason. Next up are kind of two things at once, because I am just going to talk about both the bulk detonators. I love the bulk detonator designs. Both of them, I think, are great. They have this diseased vibe. They're covered in fleshy growths and masses and all kinds of yuck, and I love it. In addition, their role is to be a screaming, horrifying mass of combustive death that is absolutely the most disruptive enemy. They have to be dealt with. They cannot be ignored. Much like the oppressors, they will dig to you, but unlike the oppressor, the hole they dig is huge, massive. It's boss size, and they sport a monstrous 4000 HP with a 50% resistance to explosive damage. They're most fleshy of fleshy bulbs up here, the glowing sacs dangling off their back. Those have a whopping ×3 multiplier for damage, and each have 200 HP, meaning you can pop them all and get them relatively low, but with 4000 HP, it's not guaranteed to kill them quickly. They are both, they somehow manage to be both damage soak and also mass disruption enemy. There are ways to bait them into exploding without hurting anybody, the main way being a scout can grapple over top of them, or walk up to them and then grapple away, I should say, but sometimes leaving them alive is actually the play, because their attacks do friendly fire damage, which means that you can, like I mentioned, grapple over top of them with a scout, and as long as you get into that dome around them that is their kind of aggro zone, you can clip through that just enough that they do an attack, but also get through it fast enough that they don't attack you, which is the important thing because they deal a lot of damage and you really don't want to get fucked up by them, frankly speaking. So now we've got to talk about another pairing. Oh, and I should mention, this is the Crassus bulk detonator. It's shinier because it's full of gold, and when it explodes, the crater is full of gold. This is badass and awesome. But I didn't really think they needed to be talked about separately. The next pair we got to talk about are the Arbalest and the Lacerator. These are two of the Dreadnoughts, and these are specifically the twins who appear together in the boss fight. This boss fight is, I think, my favorite of the 3 Dreadnought boss fights currently in the game. And overall, I think they're both pretty cool. The Arbalest is an annoying idiot, and the Lacerator is a big idiot. But overall, I think that their design, at a glance, looks pretty cool. You can immediately tell that this guy with his spikes and this horn and everything, he just looks a little bit tankier and tougher. This guy is the melee fella. This is the one who wants to be down punching you in the face. Whereas the Arbalest, which is a little bit smoother, more rounded edges, even here on the armored front limbs, we see that there are some like spiky-ish points, but a lot of it looks much more rounded. They're a lot less physically threatening. So that immediately can kind of tell you, like, oh, this guy's supposed to be shooting at me from range. Naturally, like most bosses, they have a lot of resistances and stuff. They have 4,500 HP. I'm not going to go into all the details about them, obviously. But in terms of their overall design, I think they're both B tier. They're both very solid. But in terms of their combat design, I think that the Arbalest is elevated slightly higher than the Lacerator, just because I find the Arbalest is a bit more interesting compared to the other Dreadnoughts. The other Dreadnoughts, they want to punch you in melee. The Lacerator continues that trend of wanting to punch you in melee, whereas the Arbalest subverts it by shooting explosives at you pretty much the entire fight. Then we got the Glyphid Dreadnought, which is right here. And then I will pull up the Hive Guard. I called it a Broodmother earlier. We're going to ignore that. I got grounded on the brain. The Glyphid Dreadnought, the basic one, is the default vanilla, old-fashioned, big bug kind of boss fight. And it's pretty solid. The shell that it has that you have to punch through before you can damage it adds quite a bit of effective HP to it. And the resistances make its 5,000 base health last a pretty long time anyway. It summons tiny babies to attack you occasionally. And it has some pretty powerful attacks. Overall, I think it is a pretty solid design. It is sort of the most basic Dreadnought design, so I am going to put it at the bottom of B tier, but it is very effective at what it does overall. On the other hand, we have the Hive Guard. Now, I'm just going to say I love the Hive Guard's physical design. I think that it does look very cool. It would be like an A tier for me. But I unfortunately have to put the Hive Guard as our first D tier, because the Hive Guard boss fight is wonky and slow. Compared to the other ones, which really, reward you for being skilled, the Hive Guard spends a lot of time with you having to basically just stand around and do nothing. I think it would be more interesting if the Hive Guard was reworked so that it was constantly spawning a trickle of smaller bugs to fight for it, but it allowed you to basically fight the entire time, rather than having periods where it was totally invulnerable and you can't do anything to it except try and kill its children. Gameplay-wise, I do find it to be a bit disappointing in terms of the role it's meant to fill, right? The twins, you fight two of them at once. That's the twins, right? The normal Hive Guard, the normal Dreadnought, that's the normal Dreadnought. He does normal Dreadnought shit. He's kind of like Praetorian, but really big. But then you get to the Hive Guard, and it's like, yeah, but what if it had very specific phases, and you had to very slowly work your way through it and stuff, and it'd be like, well, I would hate that. And then they were like, cool, that's an enemy now. But, moving right along, that is the end of the primary glyphids, or the various variant glyphids of all types. Now we are getting into other enemies, other flora and fauna of the Land of Hoxes, starting with the Kronar. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that entirely correctly, but we've got the Kronar Shellback and Youngling. So they're interesting because the Shellback has a ranged attack and the Youngling does not. Otherwise, the main differences are that the Shellback is significantly tankier with 450 base health versus 100 for the Youngling, and the fact that the normal Shellback is quite a bit bigger, of course. The main gimmick of these is being a disruptive enemy, of course. They roll into a ball, roll around, and generally knock dwarves out of position, as well as resist enough damage to eat up some shots. The Shellback, in addition, deals a monstrous amount of damage if it gets a chance to hit you with its ranged attack. Overall, I think the Youngling is in kind of a C-tier position. It's fine. It's just kind of boring, to be honest with you. And the normal Shellback, I do think this thing gets into A-tier, largely as a result of its oddities, right? Its weird design and the sort of general funkiness of what it does, to me, puts it a little bit above some of the more typical Glyphid-type enemies. Maybe that's overrating it, but I don't care. It's my list. What are you going to do about it, I guess? The last... here we go. Not the last. I don't know why I said the last. The next enemy is the... let me try and pronounce this. The Nayaka Trawler. This is the sand shark bug. This one, I think design-wise it looks really cool. I'm not going to make a red rocket joke, but it has a certain look to it. The spikes covering it and the aerodynamic design, all that, make it definitely seem like an enemy that should be fast and relatively squishy, but generally protected by the ground that it's digging in. It's perfect for that. It is exclusively found in the sandblasted corridors, which, by the way, I should mention here. Let's see here. The youngling, yes, the Kronar youngling can only be found in salt pits. So, both of these enemies are restricted to specific biomes. I love that. I love when there are enemies that are only found in certain areas. It would be cool to see variants in certain other locations, but especially in the case of the trawler, I don't really know if any other biome would make sense for it. It digs through the sand, so sandblasted corridors is perfect for it. That being said, it can't quite get into B tier. Only because, while I personally love the actual design of it, I think it looks absolutely fucked up, and that's awesome. In terms of gameplay, it's kind of wonky. Sometimes it just doesn't grab you, or doesn't do enough when it grabs you, and other times it will, like, do a triple axle, quadruple backflip, and grab you from behind, despite being above you a moment ago, and then drag you into the middle of all the enemy bugs and get you beat to death. I think it needs a little bit of a consistency overhaul to be just a little bit more effective, but I do think that in some ways, well, not in some ways, in a lot of ways, it is a better version of the whiptail, because it's easier to kill, so it can be dealt with in a much more fair way, and it's very obvious about everything that it does, making it easier to position and avoid to deal with it, while being in many ways even more, when it works, it is more punishing than the whiptail. After they nerf the whiptail's gravity relationship, let's just say. So next up we've got kind of a weird one here, a weird pair. These are the Ptorian wasp and honeycomb, or wasp nest and honeycomb. The swarms are not on the list, as you can imagine. They both just have like a swarm of bugs. They're mostly just little like black specks on your screen. These are weird, okay? As I said before, the Ptorian one is found, let's see, the Ptorian honeycomb, this one, is sandblasted only, and the wasp nest is hollow bough only. That's kind of weird, right? You would expect the honeycomb to actually be found more in like fungus bogs or something, but there isn't one there for whatever reason. That being said, their designs are basic, but I like both of them quite a bit. In fact, I'm going to put the wasp nest in S tier and the honeycomb in lower A tier. Pretty much purely based off of their design, because in terms of gameplay impact, they have almost none. There's sometimes an irritation, but that is about the best that they can conjure up compared to pretty much any other stationary in the game. I think it would be cool to see more of them added in, and maybe have, I don't know, some more difficulty tied to them in some way, shape, or form. I'm not sure. Next up, we've got a three-parter. We'll put them in D tier for now. And that is the Korlock. Now, we'll talk about each of them, but the Korlock by itself, the Korlock Tyrant Weed, 3000 HP, lots of resistances. This is another straight-up D tier enemy. I won't go so far as to say it's F tier, but the Korlock Tyrant Weed is just really bad at explaining to you what everything about it does, in my opinion. And in fact, this tentacle, this can stay down here in D tier as well. Or what is it technically? Korlock Sprout. Yeah, not tentacle. But you're supposed to kill the sprouts, and then the Tyrant Weed opens, then you deal damage, and then sometimes it will heal itself using the pink sacks, which we'll talk about in a second. To get its HP back. It's so annoying. If it's in a slightly bad position, it is very difficult to deal with, and sometimes you'll have sprouts spawning in locations that are absolutely awful to handle, and if you have the wrong loadout, the whole thing is just a pain in the ass anyway. I don't hate it, but I do think that this is another one that kind of needs a consistency update. Sprouts spawning a little bit closer to the main weed, maybe only having the weed spawn in bigger rooms, something like that that makes it a little bit less annoying to deal with. I will say, though, that the healing pod, and this might be kind of a weird take, the healing pod is a C tier, though. It is at least very obvious what the healing pod is doing, and the healing pod stands out in every single biome by being, you know, this kind of weird fleshy pink color, as well as having a lot of particle effects around it that really make it obvious what it is, what it's doing, and whether or not you should fucking kill it. And the answer is yes, you absolutely should. So, not a big fan of the core lockweed. Next up, we have the rockpox. Starting with the rockpox larva. These go straight to D tier. Larval enemies are kind of annoying at the best of times, although I don't really see larva on this list. Or maybe that's it, actually. But larval enemies are kind of annoying to deal with regardless. They just are sort of a pain just across the board. But rockpox larvae in particular are irritating because they spawn and they will just go through the entire cave to get to you, to hit you, even if you're nowhere near the spire or the spine. And that's just kind of annoying. It just becomes a nuisance more than anything. You want to deal with this as quickly as possible just to get them to stop coming after you. Then you've got the rockpox exploder. Out of all the lithophagia, I actually think this is probably the most well-designed one. It's very, like, you already know what exploders do, and you immediately see it and you go, oh, I need to deal with that quickly. And in addition to that, it feels like the weak points on it are just very consistent for some reason, and they feel very easy to deal with. Plus, because the weak points are often on the sides, your friends can deal with them when they're running at you a bit more effectively than they might otherwise be able to. For that reason, I do think that the rockpox exploder makes it into probably around here. Yeah, I think it's relatively well designed. I don't like the rockpox. I'm going to say that. I think that the rockpox are kind of poorly implemented. Now, I can't even tell what the heck that is, but I think it's the grunt. So, I mean, like, look at these two side by side. It's very difficult to tell which is the Praetorian and which is not. That being said, the glyphid grunt is not... You know what, actually? I'm going to put this in F tier. I think this is obnoxious. I think the grunt is D tier. It's annoying. It's annoying to deal with. It takes too long to kill. But at the very least, it is... It doesn't have enough health that it is like the worst thing in the entire world, right? You can kill it relatively quickly. It's not a big deal. It just feels bad to interact with. On the other hand, the Praetorian, I will say, probably bottom of C tier. I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit here to talk about this one first, but I pulled it up, so we're just going to handle it. The Rockpox Praetorian, weirdly, this one, I'm actually changing my mind in real time here. I actually think this is the most well-designed one. Because it keeps the basic gameplay loop of the Praetorian, and it has to stop to attack, it ends up being better than most of the Rockpox things because it gives you a chance to actually interact with all of the weak points that it has all over its body, meaning you can reposition to then attack. As opposed to the grunts, which attack in fairly large numbers, meaning even if they stop to do a ranged attack, it doesn't really matter, and they do it from far away, rather than in the sort of middle ground distance that the Praetorian does it, so it's not even that good for giving you a chance to deal with them. Like, it's not that Rockpox are too difficult, it's that the gameplay loop that they are sort of meant to encourage, which is strafing around your enemies to deal with their weak points, is oftentimes objectively incorrect for dealing with them. But next up, we've got the Rockpox Spitter, and this is another one that goes into the D tier. It's a little bit easier to deal with than the others. Its weak points are on its ass, and of course it's usually crawling on the ceiling or wall, where its ass is on full display and easy to get to. So it's a little bit easier to kill than most of them, but it hits like a dump truck and is just generally obnoxious. I will put it at the top of D tier, though. I don't know why I put it so low. It is a little bit easier to deal with. You do actually get to interact with the weak point mechanic a little bit there. In a similar fashion, the Rockpox Goo Bomber also squeaks by into C tier, but at the very bottom. It's a huge annoyance, as all goo bombers are, but it does compensate by it's pretty easy to get to its weak point. So if you do get hit by it, if you are having trouble with it, you can at least feel like, oh, okay, it's my fault because I'm not interacting with its weak point enough. As opposed to a lot of these other ones where it's like, it feels like I can't fucking get to their weak point. What the hell am I supposed to do here? Then there is, in a similar kind of vein, the Nadicite Breeder, the infected one specifically. This is another one that goes at the top of D tier. It's annoying. It's deeply annoying. But overall, it's not too bad to handle. Because, again, you have a chance to interact with its weak points. It is a high priority target, but it could be worse. Next up, we start getting into some of the other... Oh, wait, hold up. I didn't even notice that this little guy had a version here. What the hell? That's awesome. We'll put him up there with the other exploder. I like the green slightly more. Sorry, I just noticed that. Yeah, so now we're getting into some of the miscellaneous creatures of this godforsaken planet. First one is, I mean, this is Betsy, but it's called the Xynarch Charge Sucker, because it is technically a creature that has parasitized and consumed Betsy. I hate Betsy as an ally, but as an enemy, this is actually kind of S tier. It's very interesting to fight. You know, she's got the shield she can throw down. She can shoot bombs at you from long range. She's got her bullets that will have decent tracking. But she also has big weak points and rewards people who bring like single target damage weapons and whatnot. She encourages a certain degree of diversity in builds and whatnot. I like that. I like Betsy quite a bit. I'm a sucker for any kind of design that is like biomechanical, you know, or like a living thing kind of wrapped into a mechanical one, or anything like that, basically. And then we have the other larva, the carnivorous larva. They're slightly less annoying than their compatriots down here in F tier. I'm going to put them towards the top of D tier, because they're not too hard to deal with or anything, and while they are a bit inconsistent with their movements and whatnot, they're also hard locked into a specific type of mission, meaning, you don't have to worry about them too much. Now we've got the fan favorite Cave Leech. Cave Leech is, of course, an absolute S tier, or would be if it didn't pull me through walls and floors. It's going to be an A tier from me, dog. I want it to be here. The Cave Leech is a fantastic disruption enemy that punishes people who are not paying close attention to their surroundings, or me, when my friend has walked through a room 3 times, and then I step foot in it once, and 3 Cave Leeches pull me apart. I recently posted a short, just a few days ago, of me getting yoinked when the Cave Leech was literally going horizontal along the wall to grab me. It was great fun, and I hate them. But I appreciate them as an enemy design. They're another stationary enemy, unlike a lot of our previous ones, Corlock notwithstanding. They are a pretty significant threat to the allied team. I almost said to the enemy team. Next up is the Scale Bramble, the Vartok Scale Bramble. This enemy I find to be very, very mid, to be honest with you. I think it goes into B tier, probably right along here. The main purpose of it is it's a stationary, so it's meant to lock down an area and keep it defended from the dwarves. It's pretty good at that, but in terms of fighting it, it's just shoot some weak points that spawn elsewhere, and then it opens and you kill it. It's Corlock Weed, but less obnoxious. It goes in C. Now we have the Flying Rock, which is its own enemy. I'm going to put it in D tier. It's not cool to look at. I mean, I guess it kind of has a lava lamp vibe, I suppose. That's cool enough. But it is just a rock, and dealing with it is often very obnoxious, to be honest with you. On higher difficulties and swarm settings, it spawns more of them, meaning that there's pretty much no reason to try and shoot them. It's just a pointless waste of time, which it feels very much like there's no way to interact with them in a way that is effective. And in a similar vein to that, actually, where are they at on here? The heck? I don't see this enemy. Okay. The core spawn crawler does not appear to be on this list, unless I am once again mistaking it for something else. Is this supposed to be the core spawn crawler? Huh. Well, whatever, we're going to use this as the core spawn crawler. This is another D tier. These things are so fucking annoying to fight, and they just, I mean, it's like, oh, shoot them in the head, and that would be cool, but their head is so tiny. And that's fine, I suppose. They're difficult, but with their high movement, and the fact that you are kind of locked into a specific area, which can often be a very accursed area, I'll be honest, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of good ways to deal with the core spawn crawlers outside of using zip lines. And I do appreciate them for giving zip lines a purpose, but by and large, I don't really like fighting them. They're not fun to fight, and it always feels like I did everything right and they still pummel me to death because they just jump at me from halfway across the map. Maybe it's a latency issue, I don't know. Continuing with our stationaries, we have the Stabber Vine. This is specific to the Hollow Bough, of course, and is a pretty cool enemy. It's a plant that screams. They spawn in groups of 3. If you shoot the yellow part that you can see here, the base of the claw, it's a ×3 multiplier, which is pretty solid. Overall, I don't have any big complaints about these guys. They go into a low B tier. They're not very exciting design-wise, but they are effective, and as part of the broader Hollow Bough vibe, I like them. I think that they're pretty good. Then we've got the Spitball Infector and the Barrage Infector. The Spitball Infector is, I think, the better of the two in terms of design, but I do like the big fat Barrage Infector. Obviously, as stationaries, their main job is to lock down a specific area. They're quite good at that. The Barrage Infector is, for me, probably around here. I like their design, I think, better than any of these other ones, and they are pretty decently effective at what they do. I think they're honestly sometimes a little bit easier than the Infectors. I don't know what it is. If you get like 2 or 3 Infectors in a room, it feels like that is a pain in the ass to deal with. That being said, both of them have obvious weak points and ways to play around them, and both of them have cool designs, but I do just think that I like the Spitball Infector a little bit more. There's just something about it, you know? Now we're getting into the Mactera. There are, 5 Mactera types, not counting the rockpox variant, which we already talked about the Goo Bomber earlier, so let's see here. We've got the normal Goo Bomber, we've got the Grabber, we've got the normal Mactera, then we got the Trijaw, this guy, yeah, and the Brundle. So, the basic difference between them and their primary purpose is to find you and annoy you, but in reality what they are is a flying ranged enemy. That is kind of their whole purpose. As far as that goes, I think that the Mactera spawn itself is probably a B tier design. I think it's pretty cool looking, multiple wings and all that, with again an obvious weak point and a bit of an attack wind up, so they can be easy to deal with, but they often spawn in decent sized numbers, so not always so simple. The Trijaw is a bit more threatening. Design-wise and everything, though, it's pretty equivalent to the spawn. It shoots basically a 3-round burst that goes in 3 slightly different directions. Easy to dodge from range, but if you're too close, almost impossible, and they deal a ton of damage, so big fan of that. They also are fairly well armored, making them a little bit more dangerous than the spawn just in general. In a similar manner, the Brundle is basically just the normal Mactera spawn, but heavily armored, and for that reason, it's a little bit more dangerous. I don't like its design as much, though. There's just something about it that it doesn't do it the same way these other two do. In a similar vein, the Mactera grabber design just also does not, I don't know, it just doesn't quite do it for me. The grabber is interesting, of course, because much like the trawler that we talked about earlier down here, they fly in, grab one of the dwarves, and then fly off with them. As far as that goes, I think they are pretty good at their job. They're a lot more consistent than the trawler, and not too difficult to deal with. There is a little bit of inconsistency sometimes when you shoot them and they just fly through it and they don't give a shit, but it's not the worst. I wouldn't say it's enough to be a huge problem. It's more of a latency issue, I think. The Goo Bomber is my favorite. It goes up into A tier. It is both, like the others, outside of the grabber, of course, it is a ranged damage dealer, but unlike the others, it also spreads a slowing trail around, and that is interesting, right? That makes it a little bit more unique to fight. It also has 2 weak points, which is cool, and because of its squat, chubby vibe, it can be a little bit easier to hit those weak points. If you blow up its weak points, it actually does not spread any of the goo when it dies, which is also good to know and rewards, you know, accurate shots and good play in general, which is pretty cool. It's all, that whole bug is just pretty well put together, pretty well designed, tanky enough to be annoying without being too annoying. Now I see what that deep spawn was actually supposed to be. It was supposed to be a nadasite. One of the 2 nadasites. But that's fine. What this one represented, what the deep core represents, is the nadasite hatchling, which is just the normal nadasite shocker, but it doesn't deal lightning damage. Otherwise, they are statistically identical. These come from their mama, the nadasite breeder, and the nadasite roe is what the breeder births specifically. In terms of their design and their purpose, the nadasite breeder is an absolute A tier. In fact, I would say that the nadasite breeder is an S tier. This is an enemy that when you hear that whale sound from a distance, you immediately lock in and you're like, okay, we gotta kill that thing. I would put it probably slightly above this, even though I love this thing's design, because in terms of fulfilling its role, flawless, perfect, chef's kiss, fantastic stuff. The shockers are mostly just annoying little shitheads, though, so I don't love them quite as much. I would put them probably around here. Actually, yeah, right with the other babies. That's perfect. The roe, I mean, I'm not even going to put the roe on the list. It doesn't really count. I mean, it's the egg sac that births the shockers. Well, technically it births the spawn, the hatchling. That's what they're called. But it's whatever. I would rate them both equal. Shockers slightly more annoying, so slightly higher. Now let's talk about robots. We're actually going to start with a friendly robot, which is Bosco. Now personally, I don't really like having Bosco around because I like to do true solo stuff, but I know that if I put Bosco anywhere except S tier, I would be summarily executed outside my house for crimes against humanity. So I'm not going to do that because I tolerate being alive well enough, I think. Next up, we've got the rival Shredder. These are the babies of the robot world, and these are one of those enemies that are really difficult to deal with until you realize you can one-tap them with melee, so you just have to walk towards them swinging your pickaxe, and they all die. Driller is particularly good because he can straight up use his drills to kill them. They are actually pretty decent once you realize this. I think that they do go at the bottom of A tier. Most of the robots will not be so lucky, I don't think. Though, who knows? Next up we have the turrets. I guess we'll talk about all the turrets at once here. There we go. In order, we've got the sniper turret, the repulsion turret, and then just the burst turret. The sniper turrets, I think, are cool. They have a very obvious sound effect and visual effect when they lock onto you, so it's very easy to see when they have noticed you, but they also deal a ton of damage, and they can hit you from very far away, making them still pretty difficult to deal with. I would say they are probably B tier, but kind of low. Honestly, probably around here. No, you know what? I'm going to leave them right there. I think that's perfect for them. Repulsion turrets, I don't think repulsion turrets are all that good. I get what they're going for, but I feel like they could have been handled a bit differently. They just don't feel good to shoot for me. So I'm going to put them personally probably around, probably up around there, yeah. I think that's probably a good place for them. And then we've got the rival burst turret, which is the most classic, the typical turret. All of the turrets, all of the robots really suffer from the fact that they're kind of annoying to kill. They just don't seem to take enough damage for what they can do to you. However, all of these have a solid way of interacting with them. It's not too difficult to deal with them. They can all be one-tapped with a melee attack, with a power attack, I should say, if you can get close to them, which is pretty cool too. Then we've got the robotic appendage, which is kind of a turret in theory. It spawns only during a certain boss fight that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Yeah, these are kind of annoying. They're pretty tanky. They're part of a not very good boss fight. I'm gonna have to put them down in D tier, I think. Probably down here. On to the next robot. We've got the Rival Patrol Bot. Rival Patrol Bot, put that guy up there. This is one of the more annoying robots to fight, but they don't spawn very often. So as a sort of like micro boss, I wouldn't even say a mini boss, but as kind of a micro boss that pops up occasionally, they're not terrible. I would definitely put them at the top of C tier. Again, sometimes feels like it's a little bit too difficult to kill them, even when you're hitting their weak points. They hit like dump trucks, and these ones move around a lot, but they aren't the worst, for sure. Then we've got the actual two mini-bosses, the Prospector and the Nemesis. Now, the Prospector's design-wise is peak. I absolutely love this thing's fucking design. As far as robots go, I'm more of an organics fan myself, but as far as the robots in this game go, it's 10 out of 10 for me. In terms of the actual like mini boss fight, it's a little bit more I would put it in A tier at best. The boss fight itself, it zooms around, it summons things for you to fight, and it goes invulnerable, which are my problems with the Hive Guard down here. But the difference is that the Prospector, it doesn't do anything on its own, right? Like it doesn't attack, and it's an optional boss, right? It's meant to be a distraction. It's worth it, but it's meant to be a distraction. It's not something you have to do for the mission and slow yourself down, right? So I think that optional nature of it is what separates it from the Hive Guard for me. But maybe I'm just biased. Then you've got the Nemesis. Design-wise, the Nemesis is kind of boring to me, but I don't hate it. Overall, I do think that the Nemesis, in terms of adding difficulty to the game, immediately shoots up to around here. It's probably the best example of a grabby boy enemy that we have. The only real downside of it is it's pretty much a guaranteed death if it grabs you. And that's a little bit because sometimes I guess what I'll say is it was more annoying when it was a less consistent enemy who would occasionally just like grab you through a wall. But since it's not that anymore, since it is pretty consistent, I would say it's overall a pretty good enemy design that has a lot of counterplay. Does it take a little bit too much to kill? Sometimes, but I still think that it is solid. Then we've got the Rival Caretaker, and I'm not even going to bother putting this in B tier. We all know this is a D or F tier, and I'm going to put it at the top of F tier. I don't actually hate this boss fight as much as other people do. I like that it is a whole-ass event when you take care of the Rival Caretaker. But again, I feel like a lot of these boss fights would be better if the weak points were consistently available. Like, let me explain what I mean. Remove the vents entirely. Like the vents that open up at the top, remove that entirely. That phase is unnecessary. If you have to have a phase like that, make it something that only happens at the start of the fight, right? So that drillers can still toss C4 on top of it if they want. But otherwise, the eyes should be open unless the caretaker has closed them specifically to, put sniper turrets on the ceiling or release a swarm of robots or whatever. As soon as that's over, those eyes should be open again. You can increase their base health if you need to, by a percentage of the intakes that you get rid of, the vents that you get rid of. But, like, I don't know, the caretaker just feels like it takes 8,000 years to fucking die, and that doesn't feel good after a certain point. Moving right along, we're in the home stretch now. We've got the beneficial bugs. We've got the loot bug and the big loot bug, the Holy Hoarder. Holy Hoarder design, peak. Move over, Bosco. It's a weird, flabby, gem-encrusted freak that wobbles around like a deranged ball sack. It's got big glowing eyes. I love it. It's just the weirdest thing. The first time you see it and it starts screaming, you're like, is it going to explode? Is it going to hurt me? But it definitely conveys the idea that it is friendly very well. It looks like something out of an old point-and-click children's adventure game from the late 90s. It's definitely friendly, is my point. Loot bug design. Loot bugs are cute as shit. Loot bugs go up here. Solid S tier design. Both of them being beneficial, very cool. Should be noted, Holy Hoarders don't drop like Nitro or anything, they drop other stuff, but loot bugs actually do. Loot bugs, I believe, when they eat gems, they sort of like... I think when they eat gold or Nitro, they increase it by 10%. So if you were to hypothetically let them eat all the Nitro on a floor, it might get you like 1/10 of another resupply, which is pretty cool. I suppose, but not very helpful most of the time. Now we've got a bunch of neutral enemies, in quotes, neutral creatures. Starting with the maggot. I love the maggot. That's an S tier from me, baby. It's cute. The dwarves say funny things when you click on them. Big fan. Then we've got the barnacle. The barnacle is really fun to say, really annoying to shoot. So I'm not going to put it into A tier, but I like how disgusting it is. It's just a weird little maggot in a shield, and I love it. Well, in a shell, not a shield, but you know what I mean. The Nadesite Cave Cruiser, it's interesting because it does look like a Nadesite, like actually looks like a Nadesite. Overall, its design is pretty boring, though. I'm going to put it at the bottom of B tier. You can jump on them and like ride them a little bit, but they mostly just get in the way, and that's fine. That's what they're there for. Then we've got the Fester Flea. Now, as everyone knows, Fester Fleas are the devil. They go in F tier. I hate them. In fact, they go at the bottom of F tier. Fuck you, Fester Fleas. You deserve to be shot and killed in Minecraft. Then there's the Hexawing Niffer, which is a really fun thing to say, but it is one of those names. It has kind of like a, don't say that, it's maybe a slur kind of vibes to it, but we're going to ignore that, and we're just going to continue forward. The Hexawing Niffer. Love this design. It's very insectoid. It feels almost like something that could realistically exist. This goes in A tier for me. Cave Vine, top of S tier, baby. This is my favorite little idiot in the entire game. Are you kidding me? This little thing? It's like a friendly cave leech. I love that guy. If you don't pet cave vines, you're a psychopath. Cave Angels, these are great target practice and can also be ridden. Another A tier, actually. I like that it looks like a manta ray, but with multiple eyes. It's kind of hard to see some of the details, like in-game, unless you take the time to really follow one around. But they're pretty, and they make cool noises. I like them. They're neat. Not quite as much as the Hexawing, but, I mean, who among us compares to the Hexawing, truly? Silicate Harvester's another high-ranking one. I actually think I'm going to put this one right here so that it goes along with the Prospector, which it looks like. I like the Silicate Harvesters quite a bit, and sometimes it's actually useful to use them to get around the map. Maybe not riding them specifically, but like platforming off of them is sometimes helpful, which is interesting for sure. Then we've got some variant enemies going on here, as you can see down here at the bottom. First off, I didn't even notice the Glacial Strata Goo Bomber. I should have, but I didn't. Where is the Goo Bomber? There you are. Glacial Strata one is very cool. big fan of that one. The coloration is what kind of keeps it afloat, because otherwise it's just the goo bomber, but, you know, with no goo, and that's less interesting. But the coloration is really pretty. I like ice-themed things. Then we've got these rock boys here. Actually, I don't know why they weren't on my list. That's kind of interesting. Is it because they're specific to an event? I assume that that's why they didn't show up, but it is kind of weird to me. Either way, let's see here. We've got the Ebonite mutation and the Cursite mutation. So Ebonites, these are not just in an event anymore, which is what makes it kind of weird to me that they're not in the main list. Or maybe I missed them. Who knows? Either way, Ebonite enemies, the small ones, I will say the small ones are a solid A tier in terms of creature, well, not creature design. In terms of creature design, they're kind of boring. But in terms of gameplay elements, they're decent. They are in the bottom of A tier. The bigger ones, B tier-ish. They're a little bit more annoying to deal with because they have so much HP. You need the pickaxe overcharger to deal with them, and that doesn't feel great given how random and stupid that can be. But overall, I can't put them in B. They're so annoying. They're C tier. If you're a driller, they're okay. Otherwise, they aren't. They're just obnoxious to deal with, frankly. They're basically the rockpox guys, but a little bit worse. Then we have the Cursite grinder enemies. I'm going to kind of talk about all three of them at once because they are very similar. Aesthetically, I like them. They have a very weird look to them, but it's a good look, to be like super clear. Yeah, I don't have any particular complaints. I think that design-wise, I like this one the most. So I'm going to put that at the bottom of A tier. The Praetorians are the most annoying to interact with during the event, so I'm going to put them there. And the normal grunt it actually squeaks into the bottom of A tier as well. I think it looks pretty cool. In fact, I would put it above the bottom of A tier, probably around here. I think that's a good place for it. As for the ending, we have, of course, the last things that live on Hoxie's, the dwarves. Now, in terms of dwarf designs, we are going to be talking about them very briefly, rapid fire, and only talking about their vanilla looks. Because, of course, I would be very biased, because I like how my engineer looks. So in terms of overall design, starting with their, specifically, only their Mark 1 armors, I think that the gunner is a solid B tier. I think that engineer is a solid A tier. I mean, there's a reason that I started playing him so much. I think that scout probably fits into B tier. Around where the gunner is, but I think scout is probably my least favorite of the defaults. And then driller is, of course, actually my favorite design starting off in the video game. Might be a bit of a surprise, but I like dudes that wear masks, and the goggles that they both wear fit. You know what? Actually, no. I will put driller slightly below engineer, only because driller doesn't have a beard. And I know that's because he uses a flamethrower. I don't care. He's a dwarf. Not having a beard is deeply sinful. But you can kind of consider these two to be roughly in the same zone, because I like how well armored the driller is, and how much of his face is covered by his armor, by his goggles, all that stuff. It's just the vibe that I go for, the aesthetic that I like. But that is about it. This video went a little bit longer than I really wanted it to, and we were talking about the designs and stuff. We got to kind of take our time here. This is the end result. There's not a lot down in D and F tier, and there's quite a bit up in S and A tier. So, I feel pretty good about this list. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for tuning in to this as always. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We do have a Patreon. Link is in the description if you want to donate to us or become a member. As we move forward, members will get some extra perks, but one of them that I'm going to be working towards soon is getting to watch videos early. Right now it's just a few hours early, but I would like to extend that to a day early here soon. And in the future, maybe they'll get to watch certain things very early, which might be kind of fun. Either way, though, no pressure to do any of that. Thank you guys so much for watching. That is more than enough support for me. And until next time, have a good one, and peace.